Good evening, everyone. I'm Pam Thomas, the coordinator for the Northern Virginia and DC chapter of CHAD, and I want to welcome you to our very first lecture for 2025, Unlocking Potential, Key Neuropsychological Insights for Guiding Teens to College Success, presented by Dr. Salya, Namazi. So many of you are very familiar with CHAD and have been to many of our lectures and maybe even attended a support group or even our yearly ADHD resource fair, but I want to say welcome to everybody. And just for those who don't know, our chapter's mission aligns with CHAD Nationals, which is to improve the lives of children and adults with who are affected by ADHD. And our chapter is a volunteer organization of trained professionals who offer support to our ADHD community by providing this free monthly lecture, which is all throughout up until about June, I think, and then resumes in the fall. We offer support groups for parents and adults, and we host an annual resource fair in October to highlight ADHD Awareness Month. So welcome, everybody. And now to introduce our speaker, Dr. Salya Namazi is the co-owner of the Stixrud Group, a neurodivergent affirming provider and a clinical neuropsychologist specializing in adolescents and young adults. She focuses on neuropsychological assessment and practical treatment recommendations with a special interest in helping students prepare for college. Dr. Namazi integrates the latest research into her practice, ensuring clear and actionable communication. She emphasizes strengths, validates experiences, and provides professional and personalized documentation, and is highly collaborative throughout the evaluation process. With a background in adult and pediatric neuropsychology, excuse me, I got something happened here. Okay, with a background in adult and pediatric neuropsychology, she lectures on a range of topics and has been published on subjects such as social competence in adults and early autism identification. So Dr. Namazi, thank you so much for your time and your expertise this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this important topic, and I'm going to share my screen now. I have some slides prepared. So thank you all for joining me this evening. And just to give you an understanding of what we will cover this evening. So I will start by giving you a cursory review of the brain, which I think is really important to understand the foundation of how we learn, how we process information. This will then in turn set the stage for our discussion on neuropsychological evaluations. And at that time, I want to explain the types of testing that are most beneficial for college planning. I know this is a question that I often get from parents and providers, and I'm sure this is something you are all seeking and wondering about. So we'll definitely spend a lot of time on that. And then we'll talk about college readiness. What does this truly mean? I will try to explain it by breaking down essential skills and attributes that I feel are really critical. I'll introduce you to my Thrive with Five framework, which is an approach that I've developed just based on my experience in working with college-bound young adults. Finally, I will provide you all with some actionable steps on ways to prepare your child for that next phase, which is, can be very stressful, but also very exciting. So let's get started. So the brain, why talk about the brain? Well, I mean, brain functions play a really important role in how we behave, how we feel, and how we operate. And one part of the brain, which I'm sure you all have heard a lot about, is called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, we think, develops even before birth. And I'm sure you are all aware that the prefrontal cortex develops can be into the third decade of life. We think it usually develops until 26, 27. In some cases, it's later than that. We also think that the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's responsible for mediating executive functioning. It's also the part of the brain that's the last part of the brain to develop. So, I'm sure you all have heard of executive functioning, but what is it actually? There's really no firm agreed upon definition, but we think that in very simple terms, executive functioning refers to higher order skills like organization, planning, multitasking, problem solving, forecasting into the future, that kind of thing. So it's really an umbrella term for all these functions. So, again, we think the prefrontal cortex is responsible for mediating executive functioning. And we also think that the prefrontal cortex, what it does is it takes input from other parts of the brain to plan and direct motor, cognitive, affective, social behavior. Because it takes so long to mature, it's also the part of the brain that's most vulnerable to impaired functioning from other factors like environmental factors like substance use, high stress, and more. So, that said, all of these external factors can then indirectly influence executive functioning. We also think that students with ADHD have a slower developing prefrontal cortex. It can even be like 3 to 5 years behind. Now, that can sound really daunting and scary, I know, but just as parents, please be aware that time can help enormously with this. So, regarding neuropsychological evaluations, so you probably have heard of different types of evaluations. We have psychoeducational evaluations, we have psychological evaluations. I am here to talk about the neuropsychological evaluation. And this is the type of evaluation that assesses brain behavior relationships. This type, in my opinion, is considered the gold standard method. It's the most comprehensive type of evaluation. And why it can be a really useful vehicle for helping with college readiness, to me, it's like such an amazing part of this process. So, a neuropsychologist who specializes in working with young adults who are college bound or kiddos who are college bound should be able to provide you a detailed map of your child's brain and highlight areas that are not just underdeveloped or areas of weakness, but also unique strengths, which is my favorite part of the testing. So often I'm asked the question, like, what do you do with this information? Like, are you just going to tell me, that my kid has this diagnosis? Is that it? Actually, that's really not it. It's a very small part of what we do. Diagnostic clarification is certainly a part of the process, but it's a very small part of the process. The evaluation, if it's done and executed carefully and correctly, should give you as parents and providers and teachers and whoever's involved a very clear, and also the child, which we'll talk about, a very clear understanding of the child's brain, how they learn, what they're really good at, what are some areas that they could strengthen. It should really give you a nice roadmap. And in turn, it should also provide very clear, actionable steps on how to help your child and help you with achieving their goals. For me, an evaluation is also a really nice opportunity to help our students who may struggle with confidence learn about themselves and learn about the things that they're actually really good at. And typically, there's so many strengths that we can pull and detect from these evaluations. And a strengths focused evaluation like this can really shift their perspective. And I can't tell you how many times parents will call me. I just had a meeting like this today where a mom said to me, this evaluation changed my child's life. They didn't realize how smart they were, how good they were in this area or that area. And that's really, to me, that's the bread and butter and the heart of what we do. The evaluation for, college planning can pinpoint areas that might need strengthening before college, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes. It can also, again, it can also offer valuable insights into whether, like, what kind of college environment might be the best fit for your child. And also, let's not forget about career guidance. If your child dreams of becoming an architect, like, wouldn't it be good to know if they had brain-based strengths in spatial reasoning and math? So this kind of information can guide them towards a career path where they can truly excel. So again, a neuropsychological evaluation can be a really powerful tool in so many regards. So, what is a neuropsychological evaluation? One piece of advice I would give you as parents is please be sure to seek a specialist in working with college-bound young adults when doing this type of testing. This is a very specialized skill set, and not all neuropsychs are created equal. And again, as highlighted before, a really good neuropsychological evaluation should be able to provide you with valuable insights into so many of these things that we're talking about, but also the type of college environment that might be the best fit for your child. It should go beyond just academic capabilities and accommodation planning. For instance, again, a neuropsychologist with this kind of specialty might be able to recommend like a smaller, more intimate college environment, or maybe they would think that a larger, more traditional type of university would be beneficial. Oftentimes, I'm talking to parents about, structured social opportunities like academic Greek life or clubs. I mean, there's so much that goes into this. And again, that's why it's really important to work with a specialist who understands the nuances of this type of testing. An evaluation, a neuropsychological evaluation, again, can look different according to the provider. And in my opinion, and this is at the Stixrud group, these are the areas that we commonly assess. We try to look at every domain that we can to get a comprehensive picture of the child. So these are the areas that we typically look at. So we always examine intellectual capacity, we look at attention span, but not just attention. We also look at different types of attention. So we look at short, simple attention. So some people, some kiddos may struggle with sustained attention, but they can gear up and focus for rapid spurts. So there we have tests that we look that we give that can tell us information about that. We also look at a range of executive functioning skills, phonological and rapid naming processing, which are skills that are very fundamental for reading. We look at verbal and nonverbal learning and memory, expressive and receptive language, achievement ability, which would include reading, writing, and math, social cognition, personality features, emotional functioning. Importantly, and this is a part of the evaluation that I take very seriously, and unfortunately, I do a lot of second opinions, and I don't always see this type of testing being done, which saddens me because this is a big part of college readiness, which is adaptive skills. So adaptive skills really refers to independent living skills. This can range from very simple tasks like bathing, hygiene management, to cooking meals independently, paying bills when on time, managing my day-to-day demands. So, a neuropsychological evaluation should provide data driven information about executive functioning abilities, again, attentional capacity, and so forth. I mean, as a mom myself, I could tell you that I worry about, my child's attention span, but is it, that he actually struggles, or is it just that in certain situations he struggles? Is this age appropriate? An evaluation would tell me, like, hey, his attention span in this setting is below the first percentile or something like that. That's what an evaluation can answer for you. In addition to that, uh, the neuropsychological evaluation should also be helpful in determining the types of supports before college or during college that might be helpful. So, for example, there are certain academic skills that can aid in college readiness, like reading comprehension and written expression are two, skills that I like to see, as well developed as possible before a student heads off. It doesn't mean that if these are areas of weakness that we can't get them supports while they're there. Of course, it doesn't mean that college isn't, possible. It just means that we need to be supporting these students while they're in college, preferably supporting them before they even go to college. In addition to that, a foreign language waiver is something that we're often asking for our dyslexic students or students with language-based learning disabilities. And a neuropsychological evaluation can determine if that's necessary. In addition to all of that, as I touched on earlier, an evaluation can provide data-driven information on a child's life skills, adaptive skills. So, there are these widely used instruments that can provide detailed insight into these tasks, how well a person can manage all these life demands. And in my opinion, this is really, really critical for college readiness. Now, these are questions I'm asked a lot, and this is kind of a tough question to answer because I could go on and I could probably talk about this for hours. But I spent some time talking with my good friends Joan Witten and Liz Cooper of the College Consulting Collaborative, and we've compiled a comprehensive list of recommendations to guide you through what you want to look for when you are getting this type of testing done. So a question I'm asked a lot is when should I have my kid tested? Like I had her tested, 3 years ago in the ninth grade, and do I really need to repeat the testing? And the answer to that, which I've changed my mind on this over the years, I used to say you need to get testing done no matter what, but I've kind of changed my tune on that. And really, if the testing is robust and thorough, and touches on the areas I've discussed, and is and also includes the other components which I'll touch on. It doesn't actually matter as much when the testing was done. Ninth grade testing should be okay. Okay, it just has to be good, robust testing. Ideally, the results in the report would be organized by domain. And it would be to make it very clear for the disability personnel and for parents and everybody to be able to read the report and to really understand the results. The report should also have a diagnosis list with ICD codes. I can't tell you how many times I've read reports, I've done second opinions, I've done reevaluations, and there's no diagnosis list. I'm like, this is so confusing. And what am I really reading? What am I looking for here? So, an actual diagnosis list with the codes, that's also key because that's what these disability support service centers are looking for. They're looking for the codes. So the report really should have these codes here. The report should also include a list of diagnoses with I'm sorry, a list of accommodations and how the student uses and benefits from the accommodations. So if your child's already receiving accommodations, I want to see that in the report. I want to see what they're receiving and how it's helping them. That's key. Reports should also ideally include percentiles and a separate appendix. I want to see an appendix with the scores. That's what they're looking for too. So a lot of times, in IEP meetings as well, the school personnel, they're looking at these scores, and it should be easy to find, and it should be at the end of the report, and it should be easy to find. When it comes to college accommodations, ideally, there would be a dedicated section for just these accommodations. And this section would have strong justification and urgent language to emphasize their importance. In addition to that, an added bonus in my mind is that there would be another appendix with just the college accommodations listed. And this approach, I think, and as do my colleagues, agree that this can further ease the burden on the disability office and help expedite the process. Now, this next one it's tough, and this is a part of our job that I think takes a lot of skill. Being able to write for a varied audience. The reports are not just important for parents, they're important for the Disability Services Office, they're important for the child, they're important for any adult who's working with the child. And the language should really be written in a way that's easily communicated and easily understood. The evaluator should also include, ideally, a statement on how to prioritize the recommendations. Oftentimes, again, I'm seeing these beautiful reports with these really lengthy laundry list of recommendations. And as a mom myself, I look at these and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed just reading this. And ideally, we would have, some kind of statement, excuse me, or way that the parent reads this report and they're like, okay, I know what to do and I can do this. Finally, in my view, the most important aspect of this whole thing is that the evaluator takes the time to explain the findings to the child in a strength-based, motivating manner. I personally achieve this or try to achieve this by not only meeting with the student individually to review the results in a way that's meaningful, understandable, motivating for the student, but I also always give them a letter or a separate document for them to have themselves. I mean, I write, 25-page reports and some of it, we have to use certain language and certain phrasing to advocate for the student, but I want the student themselves to have something that they can refer back to for years to come. So these letters are like 4 or 5 pages, and they're written in a more colloquial, informal manner. But I think that's really important for them. So that to me is a really big part of the testing process. Now, thinking about planning for college and accommodations, it's important to mention, again, because I've been doing this for a while and I work with so many parents, that this is an area that can be very easily confused. And we have something called IDEA, and then we have something called ADA, which we'll talk about. And it's important to note that each college offers its own range of accommodations and support services, and this can vary significantly in the quality and the scope. IDEA does not exist in college. ADA is the standard. So what does that mean? So what is IDEA? This is a lengthy definition. I'm just going to summarize it for you. The Individuals with Disabilities Act is a U.S. federal law that guarantees students with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education tailored to their needs through an individualized education program. It emphasizes education in the least restrictive environment and includes safeguards to protect the rights of students and their families, covering individuals from birth through age 21. Now we have the ADA. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a U.S. civil rights law enacted in 1990 that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in employment, public services, and public accommodations. It ensures equal rights and access by requiring reasonable accommodations and accessibility, promoting equal opportunity and independent living for individuals with disabilities. Colleges and universities primarily operate under ADA because IDEA applies to K through 12 and it focuses on providing special education services to students with disabilities. In contrast, the ADA applies to higher education institutions. So these laws, instead, what they do is they require colleges to provide reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities to ensure equal access to educational programs and activities. Unlike IDEA, the ADA does not require colleges to modify academic standards or create individualized education plans. Instead, it focuses on removing barriers and ensuring accessibility, such as providing assistive technologies, extended time for exams, and accessible facilities. This is another reason, I think a major reason, why a good comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation can be helpful, as it can help in determining the types of supports and accommodations that may be necessary for the student. Because colleges operate under the ADA rather than IDEA, they have flexibility in determining the types of supports and accommodations they provide to students with disabilities. Again, it requires institutions to offer reasonable accommodations, but it doesn't specify exact services or supports. This is really important. This means that each college can interpret and implement accommodations differently based on their resources, policies, and student needs, leading to variability in the support offered across different institutions. Not all colleges offer everything. That's really important. Now, I think it's important to spend a little time looking at the key statistics from educationdata.org regarding the college graduation rates in the US. So it's interesting, only 1 in 4 high school graduates who enroll as college freshmen will graduate within 4 years. When we focus on students pursuing bachelor's degrees, the picture improves somewhat, with 60% eventually graduating. But it's important to remember that only 18% of these students actually finish their studies within the traditional 4-year time frame. For those pursuing associate's degrees, the completion rate's even lower, with just 31.6% graduating. On a more positive note, though, graduation rates at public colleges have seen a 15% increase since 2010, which indicates some progress in supporting student access. So this is also interesting. College enrollment among individuals with ADHD has been on the rise, which I think is a good thing, with prevalence rates ranging from 2 to 8%. And these students make up about 25% of those receiving disability support services. Despite these higher enrollment rates, students with ADHD often find themselves less prepared for college compared to their peers. And this can also contribute, to lower graduation rates among this group. One key factor, I think, in bridging this gap is parental support, but the type of support that builds independence and resiliency in our students, which we'll talk about next. So, this Thrive with Five framework is really grounded in my extensive experience working with college bound students. So, over the years, I've observed these 5 components: self awareness, self advocacy, sleep hygiene, mood regulation, and decision making. They all kind of build on each other, and I think they're pretty crucial for college readiness. Remember, though, that while I think these elements are important in general for our students, everybody's different. And these frameworks can really vary. So instead, think of this as a flexible guide, more than like a stringent rubric. Also, please keep in mind that I'm not saying that each skill needs to be mastered perfectly before attending college. The goal is to develop foundational understandings, abilities in these areas, which students can then continue to build upon as they enter college and as they develop. So let's start with reflect, which is really self-awareness. So self-awareness is so important important just in everyday life. And I'm going to provide you just a really simple, silly example to kind of demonstrate that. So think of Sarah, who notices like every morning she gets irritable and tired when she skips breakfast. She understands that about herself. She realizes that eating a healthy breakfast helps her feel more energetic, more focused throughout the day. As a result, she makes it a priority to have breakfast every morning, even if she's not hungry. This example just highlights how important self awareness is. Imagine being a college student stepping out onto campus for the first time, and you're surrounded by all this stuff, all these opportunities, all these experiences. Self awareness is like having a personal compass that helps you navigate this stuff. Self awareness can be helpful in academics too. It can help you with picking a major. Knowing your strengths and and the areas that you're really strong can help you pick a career path that's reasonable and feasible. Self-awareness also means that you know when to seek support, whether it's academic help or emotional guidance. Recognizing when you need assistance is really important. Self-awareness also allows you to take care of yourself. Recognizing your needs helps you prioritize essential aspects like healthy eating, regular sleep, and hygiene. It's really the launch pad. And in my mind, this is such an important skill. It's the ultimate skill. And knowing yourself is really the ultimate advantage here. I'm often asked, how do I promote self awareness in my kiddo? It's never too early, in my opinion. Having as many open, honest, and non judgmental conversations with your child can be really, really helpful. Talking with your child about their strengths and areas for growth, you can create a safe space for them to explore their abilities and their challenges. I also like to use humor. I make jokes with my kids a lot, when appropriate, use humor to diffuse the tension, make these conversations more comfortable, more lighthearted, not so serious. Again, you want to do this carefully. You don't want to upset your child or feel like you're teasing them, but I do think that using humor can be really good. Sharing your own experiences can also be incredibly helpful. Talk openly about your own strengths, weaknesses, and challenges. This can normalize the process for them. Children also learn by observing the adults in their lives, so being a good role model can really help. I kind of feel like I'm being a broken record here about the power of a good neuropsychological evaluation, but this is also a part of where a neuropsychologist who knows your child and who really specializes in this can be really helpful. So the neuropsychologist should meet with the student to talk about the findings, but if this is an area that's really underdeveloped, maybe the neuropsychologist meets with the child several times. Maybe the neuropsychologist meets with them over a span of months. I mean, this can really be developed in so many ways and from so many different angles. If this area is severely underdeveloped, which it can be in some of our kiddos, consider encouraging your child to work with a therapist. That could be helpful in promoting this skill. Okay, the next concept is called it is advocacy. So I mean, clearly self-advocacy skills are really important. Self-advocacy skills can empower students understand and articulate their needs, ensuring that they access the supports and resources they need. When kiddos enter college, when they're in college, they're expected to manage all this stuff, all these complex systems, all on their own, which could include seeking accommodations, managing their schedules, and so forth. Self-advocacy helps our students reach out to a professor for clarification on an assignment if they need it. It could also help them join study groups if they need it. Beyond academics, self advocacy could also mean communicating with a roommate to resolve conflicts or seeking mental support when you need it. An often overlooked aspect of self advocacy, which is very sad when this happens, and it happens pretty often, is the importance of notifying parents or a trusted adult if things are not going well in college. In my experience, I've seen this happen far too often where our young adults are in school and maybe they're struggling, they get overwhelmed, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. Of course, they don't want to call mom and dad to tell them that they're failing. And instead they sit in their room, they're playing video games, they don't know what to do, and they're overwhelmed and they shut down. Encouraging communication can help ensure that students receive the support they need before these issues escalate. So keeping an open line of communication with your child is important. Self-advocacy is not just a one-time skill. This again, I hope I'm not sounding that way. It really is a skill set that should be developed and refined throughout life. As students grow, they face new challenges. The ability for advocating for themselves becomes much more important. Self-awareness is essential in order to advocate for your needs. You need to know what your needs are in order to advocate for them, clearly. So how do we develop these skills? The first thing we do is we allow our students, our children to practice, practice, practice. And practicing can look so different. We're going to talk about that. So practicing could literally look like you are role playing with your kiddo. You come up with a scenario and you role play how to handle that. It could also look like and should ideally the best way for a child to learn how to self-advocate is by allowing them to have real life opportunities to self-advocate. This means allowing them as much as possible to handle situations independently, such as resolving conflicts with friends, communicating with teachers about their needs. In situations like this, your role can shift to that of like a consultant. Um, Sorry, I just missed my slide. Your role can change to that of a consultant, and you really become more of a supporter. And you can offer your guidance and advice without taking over and trying to solve your child's problems. By giving your child as much control as possible, At this time, you're developing and you're empowering them to develop critical skills in communication, problem solving, decision making, and so forth. So this could be like, for example, if your child's struggling in school with a school assignment, instead of stepping in to just solve the problem for them, you might ask them questions that help them think through their options and decide on a course of action. Like, well, what do you think we should do? Or what do you think you should do here? Or how do you feel about this or that? This approach can build their confidence and competence in advocating for themselves. You want your child, of course, you want to provide help. Of course, we want to help our kids, but we want our child to know when to ask for help. So it's not that I'm expecting or I'm arguing that children shouldn't need help. I am instead encouraging our students to understand when they need help and how to ask for it. Everybody needs help in life, but we need to be able to know when to ask. Empower your child by fostering their internal locus of control, which refers to the belief that they have an influence over their own lives and outcomes. A strong sense of control is fundamental not only to mental health, but also effective self advocacy. My mentor, William Stixrud, and his co author, Ned Johnson, have written amazing books, The Self Driven Child and What Do You Say, about this very topic. And I encourage you to look at those resources to get some more tips on this. Normalize asking for help as parents. Emphasize as much as possible that seeking support is is a sign of strength, not of weakness. Finally, be a role model. Demonstrate self advocacy in your own life. Share your experiences of speaking up for your needs and the positive outcomes. Okay, next, we will cover rest, which happens to be my favorite topic. You all probably know that we don't get enough sleep. And our adolescents, our teenagers definitely don't get enough sleep. I mean, most of our teenagers are up late, their school start times are way too early, and they're just not getting enough sleep. And I think that adolescents need around 9.25 hours, and I'm lucky if my kiddos are sleeping 6 to 7. I usually advise my teenagers to strive for at least 8 hours of solid sleep whenever they can. Why is this so crucial? Sleep is so important. Sleep problems are almost always related to challenges with constructs like cognitive functioning. It can lead to difficulties with attention, organization, time management, initiation, so much more. The impact of sleep deprivation can be so profound that a child without ADHD who isn't sleeping well might present as having ADHD. This means that for our children with ADHD, poor sleep can only exacerbate their issues. Poor sleep can also have a significant impact on our mood. Research consistently shows that poor sleep can contribute to vulnerabilities to conditions like depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders. So, very simply, prioritizing sleep is absolutely essential for overall well being. Now, there are certain things we can do to help prepare, or that our children can do to prepare for college with sleep. It's really crucial that they learn these sleep practices before they go. As much as possible, I recommend a consistent sleep schedule. This would involve going to bed around the same time every night and waking up at the same time every morning as much as possible, even on the weekends. I know that's hard to do, especially again with these really early school start times. A lot of our kids sleep in on the weekends. As much as possible, this is what I like to see. Optimizing the sleep environment is also really important. Ensure the bedroom's dark, quiet, cool. If your child's having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, excuse me, consider investing in blackout curtains, earplugs, or a white noise machine. Encouraging them to limit screen time before bed. The blue light emitted from phones, tablets, and computers can interfere with the body's ability to fall asleep. Encouraging powering down devices at least an hour before bedtime to promote better sleep quality. Finally, melatonin can be really helpful if sleep onset's difficult. Other things that I think are important for sleep is educating your child about the crucial role sleep plays in their overall well being. I can't tell you how many times I meet with kiddos and I explain the research and the importance of good sleep and how many times they didn't really realize the connection between poor sleep and that must be one of the reasons I'm so anxious. Or I do notice that, when I'm not sleeping well, that I can't really focus that well the next day. A well-informed student is more likely to prioritize sleep. Obviously, limiting caffeine can be really helpful, at least the hours before bedtime. Finally, sometimes I might have concerns but that the kiddo has an underlying sleep disorder, like a sleep apnea or insomnia or something that's more critical. And sometimes we're recommending a sleep study or a consultation with a sleep specialist to rule that out. So if you have concerns that there could be something more going on there, making sure you get that looked into before college is critical. During college, again, I understand that some of these things are just not always feasible. How often are our college students sticking to a consistent sleep schedule? These are ideal. Obviously, it's ideal that they do, but I also understand that we have to be flexible with this as well. Creating a dedicated study space, I actually feel very strongly about. So this means encouraging your child to avoid studying in bed. This can blur the lines between work and rest. Having a specific area for studying helps reinforce the association of the bed with sleep, making it easier to relax and fall asleep when it's time. Lastly, being mindful of naps. Short naps can feel really good and refreshing, and they can feel really nice and energizing. But long naps can actually be really detrimental to bedtime. So trying to reduce that, I think would be is a good thing. And here are some more suggestions for during college. So taking advantage of daylight, we know that the sunlight can have some really nice effects on our sleep circadian rhythms. Communicating with roommates if there's issues, if the roommate's being loud or whatnot, so being able to communicate with your roommate that way. And again, seeking professional help if this is a really big problem. Here are some resources that I really like. So, Dr. Matt Walker, who is a neuroscientist who specializes in sleep, he has an Instagram handle and he's got some really good tools and tips on there. And I really like his Instagram page. I also really like the CDC's page and their resources for sleep hygiene. So, here's some resources you can visit on your time. Obviously, strong self awareness and self advocacy skills are essential for students to develop these good sleep habits. And strong sleep habits can help enormously with mood regulation, which we're going to cover next. So, mood regulation skills, they're a critical aspect of college readiness, in my opinion. In terms of mental health, individuals who can manage their emotions well, they tend to experience lower levels of anxiety and depression. This means that it helps them handle stress more effectively and recover from setbacks and leading to resiliency. In academic and work settings, strong mood regulation skills are actually linked to better work performance. When it comes to relationships, good mood regulation also contributes to healthier interactions. Physical health is also affected. Poor mood regulation can lead to chronic stress, which can impact physical health with issues like high blood pressure, weakened immunity. Conversely, effective mood regulation supports overall health. Finally, mood regulation enhances resilience. People who can regulate their moods effectively are generally more resilient. They're better equipped to cope with challenges. They're better equipped to bounce back from adversity. This can lead to greater life satisfaction. As students transition to college, they tend to experience new challenges, new stressors, from academic pressures to social adjustments. The ability to effectively manage emotions can significantly impact their ability to navigate these challenges successfully. Now, I wanted to show you all some stats from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey Data Summary and Trends Report from 2013 to 2023. This isn't meant to scare you or to alarm you, but it's really to shed light on how impactful mental health is and how big of a deal it is right now. So this report showed that 4 in 10 students, or 40%, have experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Even more alarming, 2 in 10 students, or 20%, have seriously contemplated attempting suicide, and nearly 1 in 10 have actually attempted it. Suicide is a leading cause of death among adolescents. Mental health is not just a personal issue, it's a global health crisis, especially those with ADHD who are at higher risk. This means that as emotionally vulnerable students transition to college, they carry these challenges with them, highlighting this urgent need for robust mental health support. So, for students entering college with pre existing emotional vulnerabilities, I always suggest having a therapist in place before they arrive on campus. This provides continuity of care, which can be significantly beneficial. I also always recommend that even before move in day, families familiarize themselves with on campus mental health resources. I've had students where they have had therapists they've been working with since high school or middle school. They have a therapist on campus. These therapists talk to each other. So there's a nice wraparound approach there. And there's multiple eyes on the child or on the young adult. The four factors that we covered so far, self-awareness, self-advocacy, and rest, all help enormously with mental health and mood regulation. How do we prepare our children for effective mood regulation? This is again something I'm asked quite often. I really like my students to have some sort of de-stressing technique, and this can look different for everybody. Some people like to run, some people like to exercise in different ways, some people like to listen to music and meditate, some people like to listen to music and deep breathe. There's so many ways that people can de-stress, and having at least one method that they can practice at least twice a day, I think is helpful. Meditation is one of the best ways to enhance mood regulation. I'm a big fan of transcendental meditation. Is it really feasible to ask a college student to meditate twice a day at the same time every day for 20 minutes each time? Probably not. But if it's in their purview and they're interested, I'm all for that. Another way, obviously, is by getting a good night's rest, as we've talked about. Psychotherapy may also be useful here. Again, if there's pre-existing emotional vulnerabilities, there should be mental health support already in place. If there's concern about emotional stability when when your child is at college, making sure that you equip them with the mental health services that they need. Finally, we will end on decision making. This is obviously a major topic for our ADHDers, and all the factors we've covered so far impact decision making. Decision making is something that we engage in pretty much all the time, every single day. So let's think about Matt, who's deciding what to cook for dinner. He considers what ingredients he goes in his pantry, he's looking around and he sees his ingredients. He's looking at his watch. He's like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I only have a half hour to cook and I don't have that many ingredients here. I've got some picky kids. By weighing all these factors, he decides to make a quick pasta he knows his kids will eat and the vegetables he has on hand. This sounds like no biggie, really, but this simple decision-making process is important because Matt was efficiently able to use the resources he had on hand, manage his time well, and ensure his family enjoys a healthy meal. So everyday decisions like this, they demonstrate how decision-making skills help us navigate daily life effectively, balancing our needs and our priorities. Decision-making can help navigate the newfound independence that comes with college life. As young people transition to this environment, they often find themselves without the familiar structure provided by parents. This shift means that even simple day-to-day decisions like when I should do homework, study, socialize, whatnot, can become challenging. Decision making in college also extends beyond daily routines. It involves choosing classes, extracurriculars, career paths, and so forth. So we want to encourage our young people as much as possible to make their own decisions so they can continue to practice and refine these skills before they go to college. Students with ADHD often face increased difficulty with decision making. This skill is particularly important because we know that substance use and partying are common in college. College presents numerous opportunities and pressures to engage in these things. And for students with ADHD who may already struggle with impulsivity and risk taking, these situations can be even more difficult. Effective decision making allows students to consider the potential consequences of their actions, helping them make choices that align with their long term goals and values. By developing these skills, they can better resist things like peer pressure and they can make healthier decisions. That's why we want to encourage our students to develop and practice these strategies so they have more confidence to make the choices that support their well being. Another way to support these skill sets, is working with an executive functioning coach. For many of my students with ADHD, they find this can be so helpful. These coaches often provide strategies and support to enhance these skills, helping students manage their impulses, helping them make informed choices about these aspects of college. I also think it's important to spend just a minute on screen time. Screen time's a really big deal, and I'm sure everybody out there, I have kids. It's a big deal in my house. I'm sure it's a big deal in your homes too. Unfortunately, there isn't a ton of research on ADHD, young adults in college and screen time, but there's a little bit of research. And we also think that some of the patterns we notice in younger kids and adolescents with ADHD, those patterns also apply for college students. So, what we think happens is that excessive screen time can negatively impact academic performance in college. We also think that screen time can affect our sleep, which we know can affect all these other things that we talked about. We also think that excessive screen time can lead to difficulties with mood regulation. All of that said, that sounds very negative and daunting. Technology is not all bad. We know that. I mean, but, yeah, with especially with younger populations and also with young adults with ADHD. Educational apps, online resources, assistive technologies. I mean, we have all that at our home too, and they can be really helpful and supportive. So it's important for we have to be able to teach our students and ourselves how to have a healthy relationship with technology. So just to wrap up the Thrive with Five, we talked about self awareness, which, in a very general sense, refers to understanding oneself. It's the foundation for personal growth and the development of the other factors that we discussed. Self advocacy, which really refers to empowering students to articulate their needs and to seek support when necessary. Third was sleep and the importance of a good night's rest. Prioritizing sleep hygiene is vital for maintaining energy levels, mental clarity, and so forth. The fourth factor we reviewed was mood regulation, or the developing the ability to manage emotions effectively. Finally, we covered effective decision making, which equips students to enable them to evaluate options and make informed choices. Okay, so now what? I've been talking at you for what, 45 minutes, and you're probably wondering, this is all really nice, nice and useful, but what do I actually do now? So let's talk about what to do. First, I think it's crucial to start early. Having open conversations with your child about their strengths, areas for growth, and goals. Encourage them to consider the Thrive with Five constructs, discuss how these can be applied at home and applied in a college setting. I also really, really love sending my kiddos to work with college consultants. This is huge. I think it's really critical that our kids work with college consultants who have expertise in this. Unlike school-based counselors, guidance counselors, these specialists generally have superior college knowledge. They are constantly visiting these schools. They understand the social landscape of these schools, the clubs, the types of accommodations and supports. Many parents, they start working with such specialists as early as 10th grade. So as early as possible, I think is good. Consider seeking a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation with a provider who has expertise in helping students transition to college, if you feel that's necessary. This can inform a personalized college readiness plan that addresses specific needs and areas for growth. And as we learned, not all neuropsych evaluations are created equal. This is again dependent on the needs of the student. Importantly, collaborate with your child to create a college readiness plan. This plan should be a mutual agreement that outlines goals, expectations, and strategies. It also should include, at the very least, a period of several months where your child actually practices these skills to build confidence and competence before college begins. Beyond the areas we've already discussed and covered, I also think it's important to include things like medication management, especially our students with ADHD who take meds, meal planning, laundry, and so forth. This is also where the neuropsychologist working with your child, if you opt to do testing, can be invaluable. They can help you narrow down a list for your kid, help you make a list that's very tailored to the needs of your child. Remember, it's extremely important to help your child become more independent and increase confidence in their decision making skills. Again, this is what I just said, but I feel like it's worth saying again. Students should demonstrate their readiness for college over an extended period before they actually go. College is not an entitlement, it's an opportunity earned through consistent effort and preparation. They need to be able to run their own lives before leaving home. Before your child even sets foot on campus, I always suggest talking and contacting the Disability Support Services Center beforehand to inquire if you need to be applying for accommodations now and inquiring about the process, making a connection. You can help your child with this initial process, helping them find the email addresses and so forth. But it's important to note that a lot of these schools, they just want to talk to the kid. They don't necessarily want to talk to the parent, and they might actually shut you down if you try. So this is where, you have to be able to kind of step away and let your child take the lead. But again, being there as a support system can be helpful. Equally important is knowing where the mental health services are located on campus, even if you're not concerned, because that could change. Anything could change. Finally, having a well-defined safety net is critical, especially for our kiddos with ADHD. This can include support from various professionals. Again, a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, as we've been discussing this whole time, can be helpful here. A good evaluation might suggest the need for a psychotherapist or an executive functioning coach to help with organization and time management, a speech language pathologist to help with language or reading comprehension, or a content specific tutor. So, by establishing a tailored support network based on these findings, you can help your child feel more secure and empowered, and you can establish clearer communication channels. Planning for the best, but always preparing for the unexpected is also something I commonly will recommend. Have a plan B. Especially for our kiddos with ADHD, we know that the prefrontal cortex is less mature than their peers. There's also a lot of research on the benefit of gap years. So making sure that you are planning for contingencies and you're also just making sure that when the time comes, your child is ready to go. If you are thinking, well, I might want to consider a gap year, I would still suggest that you apply as you would, that the child apply normally, like they're going to college that year or the next year, and that they consider deferring admission. A lot of these schools now allow kiddos to defer admission. Again, this is not universal, so I would suggest that you speak with the school directly to ensure this. They have different rules about this. But I do think that having a plan B can be really helpful. It decreases stress, it increases control. It's just really, really beneficial. I also think that there's been so many times that I've suggested that the student wait a year or that they defer admission a year and that they went anyway and they were back home within a month or 2 months or 3 months. Finally, 40% of people who get a college degree don't have a job that requires one, so don't be scared of alternate paths. And here's some resources which I'll share with you all, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Namazi. That was an amazing, amazing amount of information and so well structured for everybody. There are a few questions. Is a neuropsychological evaluation different by age, for example, if one's done in middle school versus high school?
Ooh, I think it depends on are there more specifics with the ages? Because
They're
it could,
just saying middle school versus high school. I'm wondering if they're thinking about, like, people often talk about 16 and the adult IQ.
yeah, which we don't emphasize as much anymore.
Right, right.
Again, I want to revisit what I said earlier about the robustness of the actual testing. I would say that when I test a middle schooler, I don't put in college level accommodations in a report for a middle schooler because so much can change cognitively and so much does change cognitively. So I would suggest updated testing, but I wouldn't necessarily suggest updated testing for like a ninth grader if the testing was really good and thorough. Does that answer the question?
I think it does.
Okay.
So our next question is, in addition to adaptive skills, what are your views on aptitude testing?
Aptitude testing, like what?
Not given any example.
So aptitude in terms of intellectual functioning, I guess I'm not sure what that would refer to.
Um, I'm not sure either. If the person who wrote this question wants to give me more insights, we can come back to that.
Or is that more like SAT, ACT?
I'm thinking it's more the testing that they do, the grade-based testing that they'll do in schools, looking at how the child is matching to the scope and sequence, that should be something that they're, looking at how they've gained the skills at different levels of education.
Okay, so yeah, I think all that can be useful. And when I'm doing my evaluations, I request all those records and I take everything into account.
Okay, we just got aptitude is in best career paths.
Oh, okay. So in my opinion, a good neuropsychological evaluation should be able to tell you really good career paths for your kid. So, for example, I have terrible spatial reasoning skills. I would make the worst architects. Like if I did a spatial reasoning test, I would suck at it. My husband is an architect. He would ace all those tests. So if I never had interest in being an architect, but if I had interest in that, I would want to know from my evaluator if I got tested, do I have good spatial reasoning skills? And they would say, heck no, this is not a good place for you to be. That, in my opinion, that is really critical, and a good tester should be able to give you that information. And not just based on, so it's more nuanced though. It's not just based on the scores on certain tests. It's also personality and social factors that I take into account when I'm thinking about those questions.
So the next question, I'll see if you have anything to add to it. We sort of gave an answer, but I bet you have something you'd like to add, maybe. Are there counselors or therapists that cover executive function coaching so that it can be covered by insurance?
I don't know, Kathy, you might know better than I do
Okay, so
than that.
yeah, we already talked about the fact that it's not covered because it's not deemed a medical service. But the piece that parents can try is some flexible spending accounts allow for it, others don't. Oddly, despite the age of the child, I've had a few flexible spending accounts that covered it under childcare. So, see if flexible spending will cover it. Most therapists will not say that there is something else therapeutically if they're just going to do executive function coaching. So you'll pay them also. The therapy groups that do coaching also are very specific about they charge for the executive function coaching because they can't say they're doing something they're not. Let's see. Can you turn back to the resources slide while we're talking?
Yeah. Which one? I have three.
I don't know. Just could you turn back to the resources slide? It says.
So this slide here is so we have College Consulting Collaborative, who I really like for college planning. I have other suggestions for that too. These are college consultants, and they help me with the section on the testing. Um, This also has some articles on just mental health and transitioning to college and the education data information. And then here, I can share my slides too. Is that okay to do? So
Yes,
everybody has, okay.
we encourage that.
So, and I don't know, maybe they wanted to see the sleep resources too, because I really like Dr. Matt Walker on Instagram. He's great. And I think social media is really good for kids. I mean, that's what they use. So I would recommend Dr. Matt Walker's Instagram handle. I think he's got some good stuff there.
The next question is, I've heard that neuropsych testing can have issues with false negatives due to the environment and the stresses impact of testing of the testing impact on the stress due to the environment and stresses impact on testing environment. Can you talk a little bit about the level of necessity versus other diagnostics and what testing can expand upon for individual issues, knowing that all of this is complicated by insurance coverage? That's first part. Second part is, if people can't afford the neuropsych, what should they look for to determine strengths and weaknesses?
These are very good questions. And, I can't tell you how many times I've had parents come in frustrated with our discipline, understandably. I just heard this last week. Like, we've had so much testing done, and you guys can't tell us anything definitively. You say, oh, well, she was too dysregulated, or she was too this, or she was too that, and the findings aren't valid, the findings aren't clear. And I don't roll that way. Like, to me, I think some of my colleagues put so much emphasis on actual numbers and data, and I look for patterns. I take a very holistic approach. So I listen to what parents tell me. I listen to what the child tells me. I'm often collaborating with anyone the parents will let me talk to, teachers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever, to learn about the child. And I work with the child, I observe them, we do the testing, I get the numbers I need as well. But it's a very holistic approach. So it's not just based on how they performed on this test or how they performed on that test. I mean, our tests are really our tools in understanding brain functioning. So I understand that question. I guess for me, it's a low incidence occurrence. It doesn't happen very often that I don't know what's going on. But it has happened before, and I think with other providers, it may be more frequent or more common. The way that we do our evaluations, I was trained by Bill, and this is just how we've always done them. I think we're very thorough. Regarding the question about insurance, and that's a real concern. I mean, there are places, I don't know where this individual is located, but there are places that I trust in the area that take insurance. The unfortunate thing is that these places tend to have very long waiting lists. Neuropsych testing can also just have very long waiting lists. That's why it's always good to start early. It's not to say a psychoeducational evaluation can be perfectly fine too. It's really about being able to look at the data, understand your child, and have a clear understanding of who they are, what they're good at, what are some areas that they can use, that they can develop further. And that it's not to say that a psychoeducational evaluation, which is typically cheaper, couldn't answer those questions. It's really more about the evaluator at the end of the day. I am still partial to neuropsych. I'm a neuropsychologist by training. I did all the training in it. I had a fellowship in it. So I am very partial to that discipline. Um, but I also think there's value in other types of testing.
And Dr. Namazi, am I correct that parents can speak to graduate schools, and those of you who are in the program have to get X hours on testing, and it can be a reduced price testing?
Yeah, so sure. So the Stixrud group has a pro bono program. I mean, we do pro bono cases, which means that we see, families who have financial need for free. We have a waiting list for it, as we have for everything. So again, this is why starting early is key. You could always call us and we could put you on the waiting list for that. And a lot of these other places they may provide pro bono services or sliding scale services. It never hurts to call and ask.
True. So the next question is, do you have specific resources or samples for creating a college readiness plan for your child?
So, The Self-Driven Child, the book that I referenced earlier with William Stixrud and Ned Johnson, has a whole chapter on college readiness. There's also an article that I read, gosh, was it last year, that had some good stuff in there, and I didn't include it on here, but I can dig that up and I can send it along with the slides. So there's stuff out there. But again, I can't emphasize enough how specific it is for the child. Everybody's different. I mean, they're like your kid may be really good with making sure they eat 3 meals a day, but they may suck with remembering to take a shower. I mean, it really varies depending on the child.
True. So there aren't more questions at the moment, but I want to read you one comment.
Okay.
Having read many of Dr. Namazi's evaluations, they are some of the most thorough assessments in the DC area. She truly knows the students she's evaluating. I will second that one. So thank you for joining us, because I know how busy you are. I know how much time you take both at work and at home dealing with the students that you've tested and that you're writing reports for, and we really appreciate your time. If anybody has any more questions, we'll give it 1 minute. Okay. And the next point isn't a question, but your passion for this comes through. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. We will see you again next month. Dr. Namazi, thank you so much for your time and for the presentation. And as Dr. Namazi said, she will share slides and the resources, that article with people. So we really appreciate it. This lecture will be up on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and reference it there in the next few days.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night, everyone.